wherein there's this possibility coming about where Donald Trump actually wins the popular vote, but then loses the Electoral College, which would be just the Democrats' absolute wet dream. Guys, not to be the bearer of bad news on this beautiful Sunday morning, but we have a red alert. Donald Trump has taken the lead in the national poll. The average of polls, this is not just a singular one-off poll. This is the average of polls on Real Clear Politics. And for the longest time, Kamala Harris was leading pretty much since she started running this race. We know the history that Joe Biden was doing abysmally poor. That was no surprise. And basically, ever since they did the switcheroo, and Kamala Harris launched her campaign pretty vigorously so. She had an excellent start. It was smooth sailing, right? It was very consistent, 1 to 2 point lead on average. Again, I know we look at the swing states for the results there, but this is an interesting barometer nonetheless to take a look at, sort of where the vibes, where the feel of the country at large is. And really, it has never been a question as to whether or not Kamala Harris would be able to win the popular vote, but all of a sudden that being put into question, the race totally up in the air. Um, and I just had to bring that up because this honestly was shocking to me. I did not think at any point in time we would see a polling situation like this with the aggregate of polls. I will say there is the caveat that it hasn't necessarily gotten much worse in the battleground polling. That actually has stayed fairly consistent, although we just haven't had a lot of data coming out of there recently. But Kamala Harris dipping down there, coming a little bit back in the average. So holding her battleground stand, but losing, breaking down in support in various other parts of the country. I've heard reporting that Trump is actually overperforming, it looks like, in New York and California, which could explain how he's making up ground in a lot of these popular vote areas. Now, there's an interesting scenario sort of brewing for the election wherein there's this possibility coming about where Donald Trump actually wins the popular vote, but then loses the Electoral College, which would be just the Democrats' absolute wet dream come true, and probably would spark a very vigorous conversation for getting rid of the Electoral College, because basically the only thing stopping the Democrats from removing the Electoral College is Republicans really like it because they perceive that it helps them. So that would be interesting. That's a very, very unlikely scenario, probably less than 1%. But that is a scenario nonetheless. And I guess final caveat to this is that, yes, on the average in the recent pollings, Trump has taken the lead against Kamala Harris. But there's a very interesting Rasmussen poll here. Rasmussen notably is a Republican pollster. They skew their data basically in the way that they do their methodology, that things usually turn out skewed to the right. So she is actually up in the latest Rasmussen poll. So you can actually bake in a little bit more Democrat support into that poll as well. So, yeah, it's like, she's had a couple of ties, and then there's this Wall Street Journal poll that potentially is looking like an outlier, but I don't want to really paint too much of a rosy picture on what in the reality is. Kamala Harris campaign that is teetering, that is floundering, and that is getting increasingly desperate. And you can see that in sort of some of the, not all of, but the recent celebrity action and endorsements, and this, sort of things like this from Obama, for example.
Now notice my palms are sweaty, knees weak, arms are heavy, vomit on my sweater already, mom's spaghetti. I'm nervous, but on the surface I look calm and ready to drop bombs, but I keep on forgetting.
I don't know. Nobody really wants or needs to see that at this point. Impressive. The, Yeah, I don't even want to say I'm impressed with Obama's rapping ability, but it just feels desperate, It feels desperate. They see a lot of what we're seeing here. They have their own internal polls that are probably showing some of the same breakdown. But yeah, that's pretty much that. Again, sorry to break that bad news to you. It's not over by any stretch of the imagination. Look at my previous videos, sort of talking about the recent dynamics in elections and how I can still see this shaking out. But obviously, not a good thing at all to be losing in any number of polls. Again, this is the Real Clear Politics average. If you go and look at the 538 average, uh, she hasn't quite lost the lead on average in those. They just, they select different polls to look at for that one. But yeah, that is pretty much the state of things at this point. We have about 9 days to go before the election. I'm going to be voting today. I suggest you do the same. And that just about does it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Let me know who you support or who you don't support or what's going on in your life. And I will see you guys in the next one.